Hey everybody, welcome back to Roto Curve. It's Josh Collacchi here, and I'm here to talk about today's starting pitchers. It's a Monday, so that means it's traveling day in MLB, and basically what that means is there's only a 10-game slate. A lot of teams are traveling, and for this fact, it's actually one of the bigger, smaller slates, I guess you could say, for lack of better terms, on this Monday. But the one thing about smaller slates is a lot of the pitchers are more higher owned than the rest of the guys. So without being said, I just want to discuss that some of the aces for today will be higher owned. And one thing about that is in smaller slates, like I just mentioned, a lot of these guys have higher percentages in big tournaments and in cash games. So the one thing I want to discuss about that is although there's an ace that you may like or an ace that's one of the better pitchers in baseball, and a tough matchup, that's one thing you have to look at. And I think that's one thing people fail to realize in these smaller slates is if they find a top guy like Danny Gray or Sonny Gray or Danny Salazar today, the one thing about them is they do have decent matchups, but they're not excellent. So be sure to keep that in mind. That being said, there are 6 aces today out of the 10 games. So like we said, there's 20 pitchers today, and 6 of them are considered aces, or I like to say guys that cost 10,000 or more on DraftKings or close to 9,000 or more on FanDuel and other sites like that. So the 6 guys that are pitching today, the first one is Sonny Gray against Baltimore, which I just mentioned. Salazar faces the red-hot Boston Red Sox in Fenway Park. Garrett Cole faces the Arizona Diamondbacks in Arizona, or actually at home at PNC Park. Cole Hamels faces the Seattle Mariners. We have Michael Wacha against the Giants, and rounding out the aces is Scott Kazmir against the Tampa Bay Rays. Of all these guys, the only 2 I really like are Sonny Gray against the Orioles and Danny Salazar against the Boston Red Sox. And the first reason for this is the fact that Sonny Gray, we'll talk about him in a little bit, and Salazar both have 2 of the highest strikeout rates compared to walk rates in baseball. And what that means is basically they're not putting guys on accident. There's always guys like Trevor Bauer who walks a lot of hitters. Tyson Ross gives up a lot of walks. But guys like Gray and Salazar who have a high strikeout to walk ratio are getting outs the right way, and you're getting outs by the strikeout, especially in their matchup today, which would turn for a good fantasy day. First guy is Sonny Gray, who faces Baltimore. Now, his strikeouts are down relatively this year, but he still has a lot of good stuff, and he faces that Orioles offense, strikes out a lot. Now, that being said, the thing is with the Orioles is they do strike out a lot against righties, but they hit the ball and they hit the crap out of the ball all the time. You see Chris Davis hitting 2 home runs. Guys like Matt Wieters, when they're in the lineup, their backup catcher Caleb Joseph is hitting home runs, and even their third-string catcher Steve Clevenger hit a home run the other day. They have Adam Jones, they have Jimmy Paredes, they have Gerardo Parra. They have a ton of guys in that lineup that can hit the ball, but they do strike out a lot, and that makes Gray simply a GPP guy for me. Now, that brings us to another point for today, is today is a day for me that I'll only be playing GPP. I'll only be playing in these tournaments. And the reason why is I just can't trust a lot of these pitchers for cash games. And for me personally, I have to find a pitcher or 2 to trust. Otherwise, that's not worth me playing in these cash games, especially on a smaller slate where guys are going to be higher owned. That next guy is Danny Salazar against Boston. Salazar does have a relatively tough matchup pitching in that park against a red-hot offense, but his strikeout upside is so high, and I think even in the games where he's given up a lot of earned runs, he has the ability to get 6 or 7 strikeouts regardless, and that makes him a little bit of a safer play. But as I just mentioned, I'm not playing in cash today, and I think the fact that he has high strikeout upside makes him a very solid play in tournaments, especially against an offense that has been hitting the ball well of lately. And I think that's one of the things that might make him a little bit lesser owned for today. Now, that being said, it's a smaller slate, a lot of people will still have him. Now, those are the top 2 guys I do like, but the other 4 aces I don't like, and there's reasons why for that. Garrett Cole is facing the Arizona Diamondbacks, who are one of the better offenses in baseball. They have some left-handed bats that really crush the ball, and David Peralta, Ender Inciarte has been hitting the ball well late. Wellington Castillo, right-handed batter with Paul Goldschmidt in front of him. They're all hitting the ball well, and that's just one thing I can't target against that offense is no matter who the pitcher is, because they seem to hit everybody. And I think Cole could be in some trouble against an excellent offense in Arizona. The other guy is Cole Hamels against Seattle. Since Hamels has been pitching in his career, he's always had an issue with giving up home runs. And we've seen that since he's moved over to the American League. He's given up 5 home runs in 2 starts. And he faces the Mariners team, which he just saw in his last start, I believe 2 weeks ago. He was scratched last week with an injury. But the one thing about that Mariners offense is although they do struggle to hit for average sometimes, they have a lot of power. Obviously, Nelson Cruz, Robinson Cano, Franklin Gutierrez has some power. They still have Jesus Montero, who's up now, and Mark Trumbo, who also have a lot of power. And all those guys are right-handed, with the exception of Cano. And Hamels does have a tendency to give up those home runs, as we just mentioned. And the fact is his last start, he gave up those home runs in Safeco. Now, he's pitching in Texas for today, so you got to remember that's a big bump for hitters in that ballpark, and it's a downgrade for Cole Hamels. Next guy is Michael Wacha against the Giants. You've heard me discuss him a lot on RotoCurve this season. He's one of the more consistent guys in baseball, but he faces the Giants offense. It's absolutely on fire of late. It's almost September, which means it's almost the playoffs, and the Giants always seem to have their bats just start to heat up at this time. Now, they have a ton of talent on that team with Buster Posey. They have guys like Hunter Pence. They have guys like, honestly, Madison Bumgarner's hitting the ball everywhere too, and it just shows to say that hitting is contagious, and that's exactly what happens with the Giants. So with that offense, I'm not sure I can target a guy like Wacha, although he has been good this season. Last guy is Scott Kazmir for the Astros against the Tampa Bay Rays. The Rays, we've talked about all year, crushed left-handed pitching, and although Kazmir has pitched very well of late, the problem with him is when it's bad for him, it's real bad. And against a offense like the Rays, who crushed left-handed pitching, you saw what they did to Chris Sale 2 weeks ago. It's definitely something I'm staying away from. Now, that means of those 6 aces, the only 2 guys I like to talk about were Gray and Salazar, and I don't like those other 4. But there are some cheap options I like today, and honestly, they're not as cheap as I would like them to be, but on a smaller slate, you kind of have to ignore the prices and look for the matchup. That first guy is Andrew Heaney against the Chicago White Sox. He has the best matchup of any pitcher today. We've talked about the top matchups before, and the White Sox against lefties always strike that bunch. They have guys like Tyler Saladino, Jose Abreu, and Avisail Garcia who can hit left-handed pitching, which Heaney is relatively well. But the rest of that lineup is really poor against lefties. They strike out a lot. They don't hit for a high batting average. And so Heaney does have the top-tier matchup for today. The only issue with him, and it's one reason why I don't trust him in cash, is the fact that he has not been very good of late. And the White Sox just saw Heaney in his last start. So a team like that just saw a pitcher a few days ago, you've heard me talk about it before, I think that's a big downgrade for a pitcher, especially a guy like Heaney that uses 2 pitches basically the whole game, fastball, changeup. So I don't trust him in cash pretty much like any other pitcher in cash today. And that's one reason why I do think he's a GPP play only, simply because the White Sox just saw him, and they do have some hitters to get the ball out of the ballpark. The last guy I wanted to talk about today is Erasmo Ramirez. And since I talked about, you've heard me talk about it through this whole segment, the fact that today is just a tournament day for me, I think Erasmo is one of those guys that you definitely want to target in tournaments because that's kind of what he's done all season long. He's been either really good or really bad. Now, the one thing about Erasmo is he has an excellent changeup, which is good against left-handed hitters. The Houston Astros have a lot of left-handed hitters in that lineup now. Preston Tucker's in the lineup, Colby Rasmus, who just hit 2 home runs. Jason Castro or Hank Conger will be batting lefty because Conger is a switch hitter against a righty. So either one of those catchers, you're going to see 3 or 4 lefties in that lineup. And the Astros strike out a ton this year, and that's one of the things that you like to look at with a matchup against them, and why you've seen some of the top pitching performances of the season come against them because their struggles in terms of striking hitters out. But the one thing about the Astros, they have a massive slugging percentage. They have the best power numbers in the league against left-handed and right-handed pitching, and that's because they hit a lot of home runs, and that's one thing that pitchers can run into trouble with that Astros offense. That's one reason why I think targeting them is only a GPP play, especially in a slate like tonight with Erasmo Ramirez. The fact is he's very cheap, and you can get all the bats you want if you use him. So if you're putting a bunch of different lineups together, I do think you should have at least one share of him, simply because of his strikeout upside with that changeup and the fact that the Astros do strike out a lot. Now, since it's a tournament-only option, do you want to find some sites to have a little bit of overlay? And that's exactly what Fantasy Feud has had of late. In the past 2 weeks, some of their big 500-man GPPs have only filled to 300 or so. So it's like playing in a 50-50 but with higher upside in their GPPs. So if you haven't been playing over there, be sure to sign up there. If you use the referral code curve, you get a $100% deposit bonus up to $500. And of course, if you deposit $50 or more, RotoCurve will send you $25 to use on the site as well. So be sure to take advantage of that. If you have signed up, go over there, check it out. They have a few GPPs that have been running some overlays. So make sure you get in there and have the upside for a high prize while technically playing in a 50-50 because of that overlay. Those are my thoughts on pitching for today. And remember, I'd advise you to not play in cash tonight. Now, I know a lot of people like to play in cash regardless of the slate, and they have good reasons for doing so. But me personally, I can't trust a lot of the pitchers on this slate, so I will only be playing in tournaments. Keep an eye out for Danielle's weather video later in the day, because if some of these small slates, if there's a good pitcher that runs into a weather delay, that could really throw things off. So make sure you know that information and stay away from that pitcher should there be a weather issue. Pretty much wraps up the rest of our segment for today. So also remember one thing. If you're going to be using all these guys in different lineups, make sure you're finding a little bit of the contrarian approach tonight, simply in a smaller slate, because the one thing is about some of these aces that we talked about that have tough matchups, not many people are going to be picking bats against those guys, and there are a lot of aces. So if you wanted to stack maybe the Rays against Scott Kazmir, or even if you wanted to go a little bit bold, a little bit very contrarian, and stack some of those Arizona Diamondbacks lefties against Garrett Cole, it could be a nice play in tournaments and very low owned. And on small slates, that pays off for you. So make sure you take a look at that, take a look at everything else RotoCurve has to offer, and let's win some money on a Monday night. Good luck, everybody.